I really don't understand why others insist on going to the bank to bank. I mean, between getting my work done and keeping my side hustle and personal life on the go, spending time in the bank can be a headache. I'm glad I got past that headache by thinking outside the branch. Ask me how. Instead of going to the branch to deposit or withdraw cash, I use a Zanaco Express agent or a deposit-taking ATM to pay for bills like DSTV, Zesco, water, or even purchase airtime. I use internet banking or dial *444# to transact using mobile banking. Both options allow me to check my account balance, view statements, or send money to any account, not only within Zanaco, but other banks as well. With concerns about COVID-19, not only does thinking outside the branch help me stay safe and practice social distancing, it saves me a lot of time. You too can stay safe and save time by thinking outside the branch. It's safer, quicker, and convenient.
Good evening and welcome to this special program. This program has been made possible by Zanaco. We're looking at the March talked about $1.4 billion IMF package. My guest this evening is the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Dr. Situmbeko Musokotwane. Minister, good evening and welcome.
Good evening and thank you very much.
So many things on your plate. This is another big one. How big is this one?
Very big in the sense that it begins to be part of the solution to the many years where we've been trying to find solution to the problems of the excess external debt for Zambia and everything else that is tied with that, meaning the runaway of the exchange rate, depreciating from where it used to be those days at 5, it went all the way up to 20. The failure to hire teachers, trained teachers for years and years, the closure of so many shops in the shopping malls and other places, because there was no buying power from the Zambian public to support those shops, and many other economic problems that the Zambians have been facing. This program with the IMF is a step towards resolving those issues.
We'll soon break it down, exactly what this package means. Having said that, I want to find out from you, one, that those who are saying 1.4 billion insignificant. What is in the number? That's part of the question. The other question is, it took 7 years of PF to seek for this, and they didn't manage. What is it that you did in such a short time to achieve this?
The most critical part of what we did is that we are a credible government. Our colleagues, as you say, starting from way back in the 2016s, they attempted to have a program with the IMF, and thereafter several other attempts were made. But the problem was that they were not credible, they were not believable. You have to understand that for the IMF, and indeed even other donors and even other citizens, if they believe that they are negotiating with somebody or a group of people who are not believable, they will remain non-committal themselves. But this time around, they believe that we are credible, we are committed to ensuring that we are going to solve the problems of this country, both in governance and the economy. Therefore, they believe that we can be supported. On the 1.4 billion that you talked about, which is an amount of money that will be dispersed over a period of 3 years. So roughly every year, just over just over $400 million. For a country like Zambia, that is of course something. $400 million per year, it is an amount of money that we can make use of it. But beyond that, and perhaps this is even more important, remember all these problems that I talked about, the exchange rate, price rises, and closure of businesses. Those have been caused by excessive debt. In the sense that the past few years, you earn your dollars from copper, they come into Zambia, those dollars don't stay, they flow out to go and service external debt. With this program, it enables us to negotiate with our creditors, okay? So that we rearrange the debt that we owe to them. So that when we resume, because now, this stability that you've seen in the past few months, it is there because unilaterally, or perhaps I should say, with agreement with the creditors, we are not servicing the debt. So dollars were coming in, dollars were staying. But that is not permanent. The permanent solution to ensure that dollars come in, most of the dollars stay in, is for us to agree with the creditors so that we have debt relief. Therefore, the 1.4 billion is only part of the solution. The other big part is because now you are going to get debt relief. Okay? Or rather, we hope, and I think it's going to happen, there will be debt relief. And thirdly, there are some donors who felt that this Zambia now is in big trouble. There's debt problems, bad governance, withhold our money because we don't trust these people. With this, that trust is coming back, so it will not just be IMF money, it will not just be debt relief. Other donors will also say, these are people we can do business with, we release the aid. And lastly, there were some people who were holding back, wanting to come and invest in Zambia, to create jobs. And of course, that investment alone, even when you talk about just mere prospecting for minerals, it's big business. It can bring $300, $400, $500 million per year. But with the kind of colleagues who were there, who were not trusted, people were holding back. Now with this, that money is going to flow in.
Minister, I'll relate to the status of IMF, to the programs, your government's programs. But before we get to that, and before we talk about the pillars of this package, I want you to allay something. A lot of people refer, to IMF as a doctor prescribing bad medicine, bad dosage. The last time I interviewed you, you assured me that this is a different IMF. How different is this IMF from the past IMF?
Okay. Some of the, first of all, let me say that, yes, IMF may have had harsh conditions in the past, but if you look at the overall picture, you and I know that 20, 30 years ago, Zambia once again was in serious economic problems. You couldn't buy even $100 from a bank to buy a book. You couldn't find soap in the shops. You couldn't find toilet tissue in the shops. Remember those days? We worked with the IMF, and those problems were resolved. It was a harsh program, but those problems were resolved. So IMF does deliver solutions. Admittedly, I think those days it was harsher. Those days you would find it common to say wage freeze. Those days you'd find it common to say don't recruit people. Those days there were so many other harsh programs.
You'd be forced to privatize.
Yes, but sometimes justifiably so.
However,
Under this program, and in the 2022 budget, you heard me announce that we are going to hire or recruit 8,000 teachers. That is not a freeze on recruitment. We have agreed with them. And the point is that the social sector now matters a lot, even as it mattered those days, because everybody says if you have a society where schools have no teachers, you have no education system. We are hiring 11,200 nurses. Some of the commentators that have been saying, they say, no, hiring freeze. Well, there we are, hiring 11,200 teachers. Others would say wage freeze. Did you hear me announce about wage freeze? No, we haven't, because this is a matter for negotiations between employers and the employees, including government. So let's not scare people from the positive things of wanting to solve a problem by bringing imaginary problems that don't exist.
I made reference to the pillars, Minister, and I want you to move systematically from one pillar to the other. There are 4 pillars of this, package. It's anchored on 4 pillars, namely economic transformation and job creation, human and social development, environmental stability, and good governance. Let's start with the first minister. Economic transformation and job creation. Unbundle it for the sake of our viewers.
What it simply means, economic transformation and job creation, what it simply means that ultimately we can stabilize the exchange rate, ultimately inflation can be level, but what really matters on top of that, on top of those things, what matters a lot for the people is to have livelihood, either a job or a viable business opportunity. So therefore, some of the things that we've said we are going to do, such as boosting copper production in the next 10 years to 3 million tons, that's how jobs are going to be created in the sector itself and in the related sectors that support mining. We have talked about our support to agriculture. We have talked about the fact that we are going to open new areas for agriculture, large-scale production, on top of what we do to the small-scale farmers, specifically Nansanga. In the next 3-4 years, Nansanga, that Serenje area, will be creating jobs the equivalent of a mining town. Similarly, on tourism, we said that we are going to open up the Cassava Bay area so that it competes, even with the potential to do better than the Livingston area. Those will be jobs. We talked about the incentives that we are creating in the multi-facility economic zones so that there are more manufacturing items coming out of there. We've talked about the fact that we are going to have public-private partnerships. Example, Lusaka-Ndola Road. Not using public funds, but using private sector money, those will be jobs. We've talked about so many areas where jobs will be created. The ultimate is to create jobs, especially for the young people. So that describes the first pillar.
Right.
The second pillar.
Before I come to the second pillar, yes, you've talked about creating jobs. The previous government, gave us numbers. I think something like 500,000, new jobs. You're playing safe by not giving the country exactly the numbers of jobs your government is going to create?
No, I will not go into that in detail because I would rather focus on what we are going to do to create the jobs. And let me remind you, in the mining sector alone, in the last 10 years, there's not been a single mine that has been opened in this country. Across the board and DRC, I'm told about 16 mines have opened in Kolwezi alone. So obviously you can see the Congolese have created jobs in the mining sector, whereas us, on the Zambian side, we have not created we have not created those jobs. So I will not go into the numbers, but just focus on what we are going to do to encourage job creation.
Let's move to the next, pillar, Minister. Human and social development. Very, very important. Can you again give us some more information in terms of human and social development? What exactly are you trying to achieve here?
What we are trying to achieve, I think number one of all those is the issue of education. We have said, and many experts have said over and over, that the most important resource for a country is perhaps less about copper, less about manganese, but more about the human beings. Why? Because we've seen so many examples of countries that have no minerals, but they have human beings who are smart. And they're smart because they've received good education.
Right.
Out of that smartness, they've been able to import copper from Zambia, cobalt from Congo DRC, plastics from the Arab world, and they're able to manufacture items to sell to the rest of the world. Not because they have natural resources, but they're human beings that are well educated and skilled. Therefore, we relate that to our situation. The base of our education system is in tatters, serious trouble. Those of us with constituencies in the rural areas, it's not uncommon to come to a school, grade 1 to grade 7 or grade 1 to grade 9, with one teacher, two teachers. Therefore, that system is almost dead. Hence, the decision that we made to hire 30,000 teachers next year. And, of course, we have provided tuition-free education. In other words, children who failed to go to secondary school because they couldn't afford a 600 kwacha, that is now history, because government, even before schools open in 2022, government is going to make sure that those 600 kwachas for the tuition of those children have reached every school. We have also provided bursaries for children who are not able to pay accommodation because their homes are far away, they must be in a boarding situation. We have provided bursaries for that. And because of what we are doing now, this program of the IMF, we are even going to add more on what we had intended to do. And because of this very program that we are doing the IMF, even the issue of the meal allowances for students, that was not in the 2022 budget. We will be able to do something about meal allowances for students in colleges and universities because of this IMF program.
Absolutely.
It gives us more resources. At the time we were doing the budget, we're not sure, but now we have a higher degree of certainty. So maybe by mid-year, we'll do a supplementary budget where we are going to now release the meal allowances. So this is about human capital development. On top of that, of course, you heard us talk about what we are going to do to hire more nurses, hire more doctors, because a healthy society is a productive society. We will be able to do more about water. So this is the core of what we want to do so that the Zambian human being is skillful, can be able to work, and can sustain livelihood. One last item. Under the CDF, which of course you know has been enhanced, that is also relevant for human development because with a big amount of CDF, we'll be able to create a learning environment for children where classrooms are decent, where the people themselves can make desks, school desks, and get paid for them, where the schools themselves will be able to get more money to buy books. That is part of human development. And as we have said before, the construction of these classrooms, clinics, desks in the rural areas. We want the people in the constituents themselves to do that work so that they earn money.
Right.
And to prepare them for that participation. Every year, including 2022, we'll be selecting a number of youth to go to technical colleges where they can learn how to build classrooms, how to build clinics, how to make desks, so that they can do that work themselves and not wait for importation of people from Kitwe or Lusaka to go and do a piece of job in Liwa. So that is part of human and social development.
Tell me, Minister, inefficiency in this package is critical. The work culture in this country leaves much to be desired. If this package is going to be successful, economic development is going to be successful, efficiency is very key. How do you wish the sectors to address this, so that this work culture can change, so that it adds value to all what you're trying to achieve?
Yes, efficiency is very important. Let's not delude ourselves. The only way we can become a richer and prosperous society is because we are going to earn that ourselves. You can't complain and say, I'm poor, and you are given an opportunity, go and construct a classroom, then you divert the money to something else, or you spend forever building a modest structure, which means that you are going to consume most of your money on feeding yourself and not on doing the work. So indeed, that must change. And part of the package for that on ourselves is that, number one, like in the case of CDF, we will give work to youth who have been trained and certified and have been proved to be faithful and honest. Number two, if we give you a piece of work, you have received the money, and you don't do the work, the police will be on you, okay? Because you are cheating your friends. Number three, part of the efficiency is to make sure that government resources themselves are applied in the most appropriate manner. And this brings me to the topic that is so current now about the issue of the fuel subsidies. Fuel subsidies means that when a liter of diesel or petrol comes in the country, just to give a very simplified example, it lands at 100 kwacha. That's what it is cost to bring it to the pump at the filling station, 100 kwacha. But government tells the pump people, don't sell it at 100 or above 100, sell it at less. How much? 80 kwacha. Then the person selling the fuel says, but I brought this liter at 100 kwacha, and you are telling me to sell it at 80. How do I survive? Government says, no, don't worry. I'll take 20 kwacha from the taxes revenues and pay you. In very simplified manner, this is what we mean by subsidy on fuel. When you consider the amount of subsidy, in other words, what the government takes out of the taxes to pay the one bringing the oil, the fuel, the total amount of that per month, including the foregone taxes, because we are not even collecting taxes on the fuel, the total amount that we are losing per month is about 67.4 million US dollars. And per year, that translates to 809 million US dollars a month. You asked about efficiency. Efficiency means that we must ask ourselves the question. Is it justified for us to be paying taxes, and out of that take 809 million, so that fuel is cheaper. In the meantime, because we are spending that money on the fuel to keep it low, we are failing to build acceptable classrooms. We are failing to hire teachers. We are failing to hire nurses. We are failing to pay retirees their dues. Some of them have been waiting 5-6 years. We are failing to do that because money has gone to make the price of fuel cheaper. And this is where the UPND government says, you asked us to change things. We can't continue like this because then we are being dishonest to ourselves. We are killing ourselves slowly. The future of the country is educating these young people, giving health to the young people. So we are shifting this money, the money that we were previously using to make fuel cheaper, that money we are directing it somewhere else to pay the retirees because they've already worked, to hire teachers because we need teachers in schools, to build classrooms so that our children and teachers, like now if you go to some of these constituencies, including mine, children will be soaked by the rain. So we are saying enough is enough. Let's sacrifice for a good cause. Okay? Let's sacrifice for a good cause. This money gets diverted to deal with these issues. That is efficiency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be revisiting, that question of subsidies, Minister, because it's extremely important. Let's go to the third pillar, environmental stability. Can you shed some light on this, how it fits into this program?
Environmental stability means a lot of things, my dear elder brother. It includes the fact that we must look out of our forests. Everyone is talking about climate change. Already you can see we are deep in December and the rain situation is not encouraging.
Yeah.
And the experts are saying part of this is caused by the fact that we are cutting trees. We are creating too much smoke in the atmosphere through carbon dioxide. Part of the problem, those days we had enough fish in our rivers and the lakes. Today we have to import fish from China and all these places, partly because now we use mosquito nets to fish, and in the end, even the fingerlings, the smallest, are drained out. So it is about environmental protection, about ensuring that as we look for livelihood, we don't kill ourselves indirectly by harming this natural resource base that is given to us, whether it's in forests, whether it is in fisheries, whether it is wildlife, whether it is poisoning ourselves because we don't dispose of the waste that we produce properly. If we don't do those things, these two come back to us. If we poison water, because we are not disposing waste properly, we are going to spend a lot of money on medicines and, of course, health services, because it will come back to us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The climate change, which relates to environmental degradation, is man-made. Minister, what is your expectation, briefly? What is your expectations from the Zambians at large in dealing with this situation? If I may cite one example, what would you be telling, my mother, my grandmother, even in the urban areas, who are saying we have to continue with producing charcoal, at the same time polluting, destroying slowly, the earth, the climate, because this is my economic source? What would you be telling them?
I sympathize with them. I have to be honest with you, because if you have nothing to eat, issues of the environment of the future will not be something that will perhaps capture attention there and then. and therefore it is up to us, the government, even as we urge restraint, but it's up to us as the government to provide alternative livelihoods that will draw people away from those harmful effects. Having said that, there are also areas, okay? There are also areas where perhaps it is more beyond livelihood, but perhaps carelessness.
Right.
If I give you the example of the fisheries that, the fishing that I was talking about, where now you, the fingerlings are the ones that are being killed. Surely, is it not more sensible to say, let these fingerlings live? Because by 6 months from now, these fingerlings will be big fish. Okay? It will be big fish. So we can still harvest the fish. So yes, there are desperate situations, but there are also areas where us as a society, we need to exercise restraint and responsibility.
The final pillar, good governance, very critical. How significant is good governance? And again, briefly to the Zambian people, what are you talking about when you're talking about good governance?
Good governance, the simplest way to describe it is to be, say, we give the Zambians, and the Zambians give themselves also, when I say we, I mean the government. We in government, but also the Zambians, give themselves responsible, responsive, and caring government. Just to give you an example, if the government collects taxes or borrows money, as normally do, but that money is stolen, okay? If that money is stolen, it doesn't matter how much you're going to do. If there's a culture of stealing public funds, you will never get anywhere, because you never build schools, you never build roads, you never, everything that you do will not work out. Similarly, if you get public funds or borrow money for the public, but you utilize it on things that matters very little, again, you're not making good progress. Just to give you an example, right now we have these, for example, cameras on the streets that is supposed to give us security, because they can see what is happening on the streets. But at the same time, while that is happening, you have this situation where children are being soaked in rain under a so-called classroom that is dilapidated. Yes, it is nice to have cameras, but surely, if I was to make a choice between protecting the children and having these cameras on the streets, I would say protect the children first. So this is just an example of how the difference between good governance and bad governance. It also means that we must set priorities correctly. And I think what I just said a few moments ago is an example, but part of that, of setting good priorities, is to involve the people themselves. Because sometimes we in the government can be tempted to say, this is nice, this is important. But have you consulted the people who are affected for them to tell you whether this thing is important or not? And this is why this year the government decided that more money is going to be given to CDF, so that constituency by constituency, instead of relying on what the Lusaka people are going to give them, they themselves decide what to do with that money. Of course, guided, making sure that classrooms are dealt with, desks are dealt with, teachers are dealt with, and by the way, even these teachers that we said we're going to hire 30,000, will instruct through my colleague, the Minister of Education. The first priority will be hire teachers in that vicinity, the children who are born and bred there. Those are the first priority, because even if it's a remote place like Liwa, a child who was born and bred in Liwa, how can they now say, I can't teach at this school in Liwa called Mulinga, or another one called Mushukula, another one called Kuli, because this is a rural area. The child was born there, so they'll stay. But if you are going to get a child who is maybe born in Kabwe and Kitwe, and take them to a place called Chicha in my constituency, or Munyanya, they'll say, me, I'm used to eating bread in the morning. Here, there's no bread. Bye-bye. So that is part of good governance. Give the people the chance. Give the people the resources and the chance to determine what their priorities are. And through bigger CDF, this is what we've done this year.
We'll take a quick break. This is a special interview with the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Dr. Musokotwane. This is a Zanaco presentation. Join us in a very shortly.
So, I overheard Mary complaining about how long it took her to get into the bank and withdraw cash from her branch. Little did I know, she was withdrawing the cash to go buy groceries. The wait in the bank can be a headache. I am glad I got past that headache by thinking outside the branch. I avoid using cash to pay. Instead, I dial *444# to pay using Zapay. I can also scan to pay using the QR code on the Zanaco mobile banking app. Plus, my Zanaco Visa debit card makes it possible for me to pay at any point of sale or online. Saves me the stress of waiting for change in line or the hassle of handling cash. For information on new products, I don't have to walk into a branch. I simply dial 5000 or email customer service at zanaco.co.zm to speak to someone from the contact center. With concerns about COVID-19, not only does thinking outside the branch help me stay safe and practice social distancing, it saves me a lot of time. You too can stay safe and save time by thinking outside the branch. It's safer, quicker, and convenient.
Welcome back. This is a special program with the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. Minister got a couple of things which are important that we must cover in this period. Let me revisit subsidies. Minister, removing subsidies, especially on electricity and fuel, is usually synonymous with IMF programs. Is IMF calling the shots on this? And how are you going to ensure removal of subsidies do not make the already challenging people's lives even worse?
Of course, I would be lying to say IMF programs sometimes request that you do deal with the subsidies. But I think a more important factor is that these are things that we ourselves as a country have been grappling with for years. Their colleagues in the PF, we know that they were also planning to remove subsidies on fuel. It's just that at the point when they wanted to do that, they felt that the elections were too much near in the neighborhood, and therefore, if they were to do that, they would be voted out. Okay, so it was part of their program. It is part of the various things that we've been negotiating in the last years. Yes, it is painful. Okay, yes, it is painful, but sometimes it's better to deal with painful issues if they are going to bring you good rather than leave things unattended to. And let me also remind you, it is not this government is not the first one to remove subsidies.
Yeah.
Because where did the PF find the price of milling meal? It was at 46 kwacha. Okay, where is it now? 3 or 4 times more.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because they removed the subsidies.
Right.
Okay. Now, I don't know what they did with the money that they saved on the subsidies. But for us, we have said it very clear. Colleagues who are driving, we are sorry. The actual price of the diesel that you bring, that is brought in the country, for the sake of simplifying an example, is 100. But you are buying it at 80. The difference of 20 is what comes from the treasury of the country to pay those who are supplying. That's what makes you buy the fuel at 80 instead of 100. However, there are consequences for this money that is coming to make you buy the fuel cheaper. The consequence is that the retirees who have been waiting for their money for years, we are failing to clear them. Now that this fuel subsidy is being removed, this coming year, 2022, all the people who are pending, waiting for their money this coming year, it will be cleared.
Right. Well done.
The failure to hire teachers, where you have 1 or 2 teachers in the school, where there's supposed to be 4, 5, or 6, because the money to pay these teachers, if they were hired, is what we are giving you to buy cheaper fuel. Sorry, we apologize, but really, we must take this money to hire teachers so that our children have a future. So basically, Frank, the subsidies that we are putting on fuel has been gone to deal with these other issues that we think are more important for the country, including the CDF. Under the CDF, the youth in the constituency, they will have businesses, they will have jobs, because they are the ones who are going to build the schools. They are the ones who are going to do the desks. If we were to maintain the subsidy, we will not be able to do these things. So which one of these is a more novel, more noble cause? I think that the cause that we've taken is more noble. If we had all the money, of course, we would give the subsidies for the people to continue driving. But we had to make a choice.
Right. Let me ask, this, in relation to this, Minister. Yes, it's inevitable that the subsidies have to be removed, and then the prices will go up. In the same vein, can you embrace unions who come to the government, who go to the employer and say, we need to renegotiate our salaries upwards to cushion the extra prices as a result of removing subsidies?
Absolutely. That is their constitutional right, and we are not going to deny them that. So that issue of negotiations is open.
I'm glad that you have responded in affirmative to that, Minister. The other part of the...
Now, having said that, of course, it will all depend on the ability of the employer.
Of the institution to pay.
Yes.
Fine, sir. The other part related to the removal of subsidies. Minister, I've asked this question before. What is the challenge of buying fuel directly from the producing country and remove the many middlemen? What really is the problem in that?
I'm very glad that you've answered. You've asked that question. Yeah. Indeed, to go back to the example I gave you, the price of the fuel lands here at 100, but at the pump station it's 80.
Right.
There's a difference of 20.
Yeah.
So the question is, what constitutes this 20? part of what is in the 20 is merely the fact that the price of fuel was last adjusted in 2019. Today is 2021, we are getting to 2022. From that time, the price of oil on the international markets has gone up. So whatever you do, the price has to go up somewhat. So that explains part of the 20, but only a part of it.
Right.
The other part leads me to the question you've asked.
Absolutely.
This fuel that you say is 100, how did you procure it? At what cost? This is something that we are looking into, and we've already started doing so. Because if we are buying expensive fuel when other people are buying fuel cheaper than you, we have to talk and bring the cost of that fuel down. Okay? There is also the issue, let me repeat that. If previously fuel was being bought more expensive than what other people were buying, we have to bring it down. Eliminate, if it was a middleman or whatever it was, that must be eliminated. Unfortunately, that alone, from the calculation that I've seen, is not enough to bring the price of fuel from 100 to 80. There are other things that still keep the price above 80. What are those things? The way fuel is transported in the country. Fuel comes in this country in the most expensive way, through the tankers. And yet, we have a pipeline in the name of Tazama. We have railway lines, in the case of Zambia Railways or Tazara. You and I remember the olden days when we used to see those steam locomotives pulling tankers carrying petrol and diesel. That is cheaper than tankers.
Absolutely.
So part of the process that my colleague, the Minister of Energy, is looking into is what kind of mechanisms are we going to employ so that fuel is transported in the country in a cheaper way.
Have you made
and
a
also, I've said over and over, if that fuel is through Indeni, unfortunately, it is more expensive because of the technology that is there. And to change that technology, it will cost, the experts tell us, about $500 million to change the technology so that Indeni becomes a proper refinery. Even then, you will not be sure whether the fuel coming out of Indeni will be cheaper than the one that we import directly. What we are saying to the Zambian people is that we want to deliver to you fuel that is the cheapest that we can possibly deliver to the country. How? By making sure that we allow people, not even government, at some point, the private sector themselves must, like what happens in Botswana and all these other countries, they compete. Okay? They compete like the way every other competition to bring fuel in the country. If you are a competitor in that market and you bought expensive fuel, no one will buy it because individual A who bought his cheaper will outsell you. So this is the way we want to organize this market so that fuel comes in cheaper, more efficiently, and transported also cheaper.
Yes or no? Has your government made a decision on the future or the fate of Indeni?
Yes, the Minister of Energy said it in Parliament. He says, Indeni, we are not necessarily physically shutting it. Okay, we are not necessarily physically shutting it, but fuel will not be coming from Indeni. So Indeni will assume other responsibilities. According to him, storage facilities for fuel that comes in. Okay, so the people who work for Indeni should not be worried. We are not heartless human beings who are just going to throw them off on the street. No. Those people will be absorbed in the new roles that Indeni is going to assume. Some of them will be absorbed in Tazama, in bringing the fuel stuff, because Tazama will now be busy. If there's anyone who will not be able to be absorbed, we will not just throw them off the street like that. We'll take care of them. The key point here is that, take this example, where we are losing $67 million every month. Losing $67 million every month on fuel subsidies. Surely, even if we were to retain these Tazama employees, keep them in their jobs until retirement, so that they will not become districts, they will not cost us $67 million per month.
Absolutely.
So it's better.
Right. Let's move to another issue. I was discussing this with a colleague of mine, and he was telling me that as a result of the agreement with IMF, there's a school of thought that manufacturing sector's costs will go up, regional sustainable competitive advantage will diminish, return on investment for greenfield investments will be lowered, factory output will reduce, cheaper inputs will increase, FDI will shift to neighboring countries, youth unemployment gap will increase, and the economy will generally suffocate. Could you allay
the very opposite of what you said?
Right.
The very opposite of what you've said. Look, you remember the last time when we had an IMF program?
Yeah.
Around the year 2000, thereabout, the economy of this country was only growing hardly 1-2%. Together with the IMF program, by the time we were saying to the IMF, we don't need you anymore because our situation is okay. That was about 2010, 2011, thereabout. The economy was growing at 6-7% per year. So the very opposite of what he's saying is what is going to happen. This economy is going to be stronger.
Let's quickly look at the date situation, which you have made reference to, Minister. The next stage of debt restructuring will require engaging the creditors. Is the country still contracted to use Lazard in the Eurobond holders negotiation?
Yes, we are still contracted with the Lazard to work with them. I think you have to understand that some of these industries, it helps when you have an intermediary because of the relationship that they have or prior knowledge that they had with so yes, we decided to retain that. They are working with them, and also some other international lawyers.
Yeah.
It does help.
As a rider to that, Minister, does your government have a specific debt restructuring framework, and what is the ideal debt service capacity, for the country without impacting the economy negatively?
The framework already exists, and this is why it is also partly important to work with the IMF, because this is something that they've done over and over. The methodologies that they apply to assisting countries to arrive at a formula for debt relief or debt rearrangement, those are well-established methodologies, and therefore I think we are set good to go. We are set good to go.
Right. Let's talk about some of the issues. Some issues that especially the previous government did not deal with. In terms of for example, tender process, outright financial mismanagement, and indeed corruption. These are some of the things, the root cause of where the country finds itself, today. What is your government's remedy to these very serious issues that I've outlined?
There are two aspects to that. First one is on the legal and the regulatory issues. You talked about the debt and the associated corruption and mismanagement. I'm sure you recall that on a number of occasions, citizens were saying, why is government borrowing so much? And government then said, well, we are fine, we are debt sustainable. But in actual fact, there were laws in place that should have restrained the government. Under this administration, those laws will be enhanced. There's been the longer-standing issue of whether the government should be able to borrow without seeking parliamentary approval. That is part of the agenda that we have, that we have to bring in legislation which will somehow tie our hands, this government and future administrations, so that other people, specifically Parliament, can scrutinize the intentions of borrowing. Second issue is that there must be self-conviction that it is wrong to do wrong things.
Right.
Because if there is no self-conviction, the law may be in place and people find ways of circumventing the laws, using all types of loopholes. But I can assure you that with this administration, that self-conviction is there. Since I came into this office, there are so many people come, we can lend you money, we can lend you money. I say, you people, don't you know that this government is failing to pay? So if you know that we are failing to pay existing debts, why do you even bother to come here to ask me to borrow? No. If you want to invest in Zambia, bring your money, go and open up farms, go and open factories, open hotels. That is it. But not to come and do business because we want to lend to the government. We are already overborrowed. So that is an example of commitment where realizing on ourselves that we must restrain ourselves. So the law will be changed, but also the whip will crack where people disobey the law, even as weak as it is now.
I see that, the government has decided that there will be no personal total vehicles. What else are you doing, and especially as Minister of Finance, to ensure that public money is not being wasted?
One of the things that we are doing is obviously, that is an example that you are talking about. But another example is that of travel. You can see the president himself will set the tone. People say, okay, he's been to Malawi, he's been to DRC, he's been, but mere travel is not really, it's part of the issue, but let's go deeper. How much has been spent on these travels? In many of these cases, the president goes and comes. He goes, comes. No hotel bills and all these other things that happen. So he has set the tone and has made it clear that unnecessary travel or travel that costs the government unnecessarily too much,
Right.
You will not entertain that.
Right.
And for us in the Treasury, certainly we are very delighted with that because this is your money, Frank.
Yeah.
This is your money, the citizens. It is our responsibility to look after it in the manner that we would look after our own money, so that we don't waste it. The more we waste, the more we fail to pay salary increment to the civil servants, we fail to pay teachers, we fail to pay. So, no wastage.
I want to ask you, I know you made reference to the players in this package. I want you to tell the nation the role private sector is going to play in this package, the role banks like Zanaco are going to play in this package, because people must access some money to support whatever they are doing.
The private sector is the key in all this, because I gave the example, we are next year hiring 41,000 plus employees. We know that is far. That's a drop in the ocean compared to the number of job seekers who are out there. Government cannot be the main employer, because how many policemen are you going to employ? How many teachers are you going to employ? The number is limited. The real area where jobs will come from in bigger quantities in the private sector. That's why we are doing everything possible to excite the private sector so that they invest and they do the work. Banks like Zanaco, on our side, slowly we are reducing on the level of appetite for taking money out of banks for government use, so that we allow it free to go into the private sector. On top of that, I've been talking to these colleagues in the financial sector, partner with us, give financial loans to the youth, those who are going to be carpenters, those who are going to be bricklayers, those who are going to be metal fabricators, so that when we give an order to a youth to produce, say, 200 desks, that youth would have been given a loan by a bank like Zanaco or another bank that is here in Zambia. I say Zanaco because they are our hosts this evening. So that the youth can buy power tools like electrical saw, electrical drill, electrical plane, electrical sandpaper. Therefore, the youth will be able to meet that order quickly and move on to another job. So I appeal to the lending institution once again, support these youths, because they will have orders. Money is there from the government, they will have orders. So let's partner together, give the youth loans so that they can work more efficiently.
My final question, and very briefly, Minister, it's a bit, loaded. The importance of covering all the players and all the players buying into this government's rescue program cannot be overemphasized. What engagement programs are you facilitating so that we are all on the same page? It's part of the equation. How can we trust you as Zambian people? Very briefly, Minister, how can the Zambian people trust you that during your tenure you're going to improve their lives?
Okay. I think on the communications, my colleagues in the Ministry of Information, they are working out a program where they will be able to disseminate information. Because truly speaking, these opportunities that I'm talking about, from CDF alone, for example, there are many parts in the country who are not even aware that the level of CDF has gone up. They are not even aware that out of the CDF, youth will be able to get orders to do good things. So dissemination and information is very important.
Trust.
Sometimes even people who are likely to benefit out of this, they may, because you see, out of every change, there are losers and winners. Okay? Out of every change, there are losers and winners. So those who think that they will be winners out of this, they need to know. They should not be misled into thinking that, because this has happened, now we are going to suffer. But if you examine to say, this change, how does it affect me? Is it positive on me, given my circumstances, or not? So communication is very important. On the trusting us whether we are going to, that much I think I can assure you. I mean, I don't promise that this government will sort out all the problems with Zambia. It is impossible. But what I can assure you that by the time we are done, the first 5 years, the livelihood of the Zambians will be better than what it is today.
Minister, always an honor to have an interview with you, and we pray, that whatever you're doing, will improve the lives of the majority of our people. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you so much indeed, and it is also always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. I've been talking to the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, on economic issues especially the IMF package that has been agreed between IMF and the UPND government, and indeed, the country, at large. The minister has made it very clear. This package would add value, will kickstart a number of economic sectors. Above all, it gives this government and this country credibility. Like I keep on saying, you do your very best and God will do the rest. I thank Zanaco who made it possible for this program. I hope and pray you picked up some valuable information from this interview. Indeed, I would like to thank the minister. God bless you all and good night.
I really don't understand why others insist on going to the bank to bank. I mean, between getting my work done and keeping my side hustle and personal life on the go, spending time in the bank can be a headache. I'm glad I got past that headache by thinking outside the branch. Ask me how. Instead of going to the branch to deposit or withdraw cash, I use a Zanaco Express agent or a deposit-taking ATM to pay for bills like DSTV, Zesco, water, or even purchase airtime. I use internet banking or dial *444# to transact using mobile banking. Both options allow me to check my account balance, view statements, or send money to any account, not only within Zanaco, but other banks as well. With concerns about COVID-19, not only does thinking outside the branch help me stay safe and practice social distancing, it saves me a lot of time. You too can stay safe and save time by thinking outside the branch. It's safer, quicker, and convenient.